this happened because we just had way too much juice to spill last week, way too much stuff to talk about. And we were like, you know what? We got to keep this party going, and wanted to set this up for this week. So welcome everybody to our first ever spillover edition of the SEO Juice. My name is Casey McBride, Senior Director of Strategic Consulting, and I work alongside these lovely two, who I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Mike Snow. I'm local SEO enablement manager at SOCi, and as I like to joke, SEO evangelist, because as we know, SEO never ends. And I thank you for joining. Absolutely love that you all come back every month.
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Kelly. I do exactly what Mike does, but on the social side. So I'll keep it pretty short and sweet so we can get into everything this week.
Cool.
So for those who were on the call, those who saw the subject of this week's spillover edition, we are going to talk about the 2026 Local Search Ranking Factors Report. This, for those who don't know this report, this is something that was started back in 2008, I want to say, by an SEO. His name is David Mim. He now works for Near Media with Greg Sterling and my a bunch of guys that are very smart in the SEO industry. They've been around for a very long time. And David handed this over to Darren Shaw at White Spark around 2015, I want to say. And the idea is this started out being yearly, and I think it's still being called yearly, but over time, it's kind of been about 1.5 to 2 years in between. It's been about 2 years now. The last one that came out was in, I want to say March, April 2023.
It was 2023, and I know this because even this year, joining like certain customer calls, I'm still citing those charts and those things, and they're like, where's the update? And I'm like, I don't know, man. So very excited to see this finally get published. And they obviously published it in 2025, but they're calling it the 2026 edition. So I think they're trying to get ahead of themselves to prevent the year gap in the future.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think people are really looking for it. I think Darren around this time last year hinted that it was coming Q1, which I think made the anticipation even bigger about this ranking factor study. There are some things about it, though, that one of the reasons we want to discuss it isn't to just go through it and say, here are all the things you should know, because they're already doing that. Like White Spark's doing that. Go there, listen to them if you want to know all that. There's a lot of information there. But we wanted to put a context on it toward our multi-location brands. This is a great report for single location businesses and new brands just getting acquainted with local SEO. It does a really great job of highlighting the levers that businesses can pull or try and influence that have an effect on how businesses rank and where. But I don't think it does a great job of highlighting those levers that are differentiators with your industry and those that truly drive rank. And so I want to go through that, because one of the things to note about this survey is this report is it is a survey. The findings are not a result of deep data analysis, though the individual opinions might be. I think there's 47, I want to say, people this year, or 57. I don't remember the exact number.
Yeah, so it is something to keep in mind where it's, again, to Mike's point, this is I would call like an educated opinion of those industry professionals. Now, it is probably backed by some data and understanding on their end, but the study itself, to Mike's point, is not like data backed, it's opinion backed. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I say that, and I think it's important to highlight that too, because I realized coming into the industry, and if you don't know much about local SEO, you can kind of think, well, everybody agrees on this, so it must be so. So having that kind of context to it really helps understand what it is and prevents people from getting stuck on something that maybe you shouldn't be stuck on, right? Like that, to really highlight those things that are going to really move the needle, especially for multi-location brands. And I'll get into that in a minute. Another thing to note, it is very SMB focused, which is why I keep saying I want to put it through that that multi-location lens. Many of the opinions are based on single location case studies. I think this one was from Sterling Sky. They did a study on how review text affects a Christmas tree shop, and it was very small, it was very limited, and I don't think did what some of the studies that I were doing that I had done at the time that were a little bigger. And so it really is based on these little studies here and there. And I think the last ranking factor study, text within reviews, didn't do very well, I think, because of this study, And I think even Darren at the time said, like, I have a feeling review text, it has a higher relevant, it's a higher ranking factor, but because of this study, everyone's opinion is that it's probably not. And we've seen now in the new one, text is talked about a lot. So it just, at the time, there wasn't a lot of reporting on it, so it kind of got pushed down. And then lastly, and this is the reason that the biggest reason I want to talk about this is it doesn't take the idea of relevance and prominence into consideration. If those who've been listening to us talk about the idea of how Google ranks businesses, I said kind of in really simple terms, Google has said they look at relevance, the idea of the information it knows about your business through what's on your listing, on your pages, all those kind of checkbox optimizations. Obviously, proximity is part of that. I kind of tie that into relevance. If I'm looking for best places in Pittsburgh, if you're in Pittsburgh, you're relevant, right?
Right.
That distance is a relevance.
Which I'm happy that you said that, Mike, because I think somebody last week asked that question. Where is proximity in all of this? And you and I are on the same page. I said it's wrapped up into relevance. It's what makes you even eligible to be on the list, basically.
Yeah. So this idea of like if you get on the list, and then this idea of prominence, the idea that puts an order to the list, the things like reviews and social and other things that we've talked about and we will talk about. And it's the reason, and we know this to be true because you can see it in the wild. I love this example. It's near my house. There's a Del Taco and a Taco Bell directly across the street near my house. They're about equidistant. And they're optimized in the same way. They both use fast food. They both have taco in their name. Like a lot of these relevancy factors that we see on here, these top ones, they're both doing. So what is it that makes one stand apart from the other? They've got about 20 more reviews and a 0.1 star rating more. It shows up. It's really obvious. And if you take that ranking factor study and then break it down in terms of relevance and prominence, you start to see a different thing. You see the primary category, keywords, title tags, all those kinds of things. Those are, again, those checkbox optimizations, right? And then it's the things like the review volume, click-through rates, things like that determine the where you rank. It's why I chose to focus on this at Reimagine. We didn't really have a lot of SEO breakout sessions, but the one I think that was most close to this was my session on reviews because it is important. The relevancy stuff is kind of easy. If you're a multi-location brand, like if you're not sure if you're doing those things, ask us. Ask your CSM. They'll tell you or they'll come to us and we can let you know. It's a very easy thing to figure out and let you know how you can update your relevancy. But prominence is hard. And when it comes down to it, more often than not, the most reviewed open business wins. Because Google, if you're looking for something, that's what Google wants to give you. That is the most relevant, prominent thing.
Yep.
And it's why having tools to tell you these things as a multi-location brand is really important. Your relevance, a lot of times you may be asked, why is this location doing poorly, right? Versus this other location. How can they optimize better? Well, from a relevancy standpoint, they're optimized exactly the same. You probably have the same local pages with the same optimizations, you're using the same categories, you're using the same attributes. But what's different, right? It's your review volume. And you can see it, this business right here. Why am I ranking #1? Well, I've got way more reviews than anyone. I've got a 4.7. I've got the best review. Of course, you're ranking highly, and you're probably going to rank widely, right? It's going to also help the distance and the proximity. You're going to be more relevant in a wider area when you're doing that. But these tools also help you set goals, right? Yeah. So if you want to know why these locations aren't doing well, and you see, well, they have 76 reviews and a 4.3, that's not going to cut it to get into the local pack. But I have a goal now, right? I know what I have to meet. And it can also let you know why that 5.0 might not be good enough, because there are plenty of times, well, this franchisee has a 5.0 and they're wondering why they're not showing up in the local pack. Well, the #1 location has 110 times your review volume. And you can see that, and it gives you a goal, right? It puts those things in mind. And so it's why we focus on this, because this is really your differentiator. This is why some of your locations do better than others. Yes, there are other factors involved. There are other things that could be happening under the surface. Someone might just be getting a lot of local publicity at a time, things like that. But these drive that. I know, Casey, I'm going to stop here and see if you have anything to kind of add to this.
No, I was just going to say, I think that this is a really good show of why reputation did appear on the list as high as it did in the first place. If I remember correctly, looking at the original list, the actual responses landed a bit lower than I would have anticipated, right?
Mm. Yeah, I believe so. I can't remember what it was, but it was nice that it was showing up. I don't know that it showed up much previously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a start. I think Google has said it's something. And in fact, I'm going to introduce some other ranking factor studies that have come out since last week that actually highlight that need, which is fun.
Highlight that. Well, because I know like you and I had talked about how like responding to reviews was literally listed as like a Google recommended, right? And
Yeah.
so if you're looking for ways besides like a review solicitation strategy, and what I mean by that is not do not bribe people to leave reviews. That is against Google guidelines. What I mean is train your in-store employees to ask people for reviews. It is truly that simple. Getting QR codes, getting things to try and bring up that volume. But another way to bring up your volume is appearing active, is responding to 100% of your reviews, both good and bad. The more that you do that, there are strong correlations to receiving more reviews. So
And it makes sense. Go back to like the Taco Bell Del Taco example. Like if you're that close, right? Like if you're that close in relevancy and in prominence, and Google needs a deciding factor to put one or the other over the edge, why wouldn't Google reward the one that's responding and engaging with their customers?
right.
Right? Like it's obvious. So, but it's also why beyond that, we like understanding that these are really strong prominence signals. We're always trying to understand what other things can drive prominence, and it's why we've been very involved in looking at social, right? When Google added those links, I'm always looking, we're always looking to figure out why Google is doing something, right? There's a reason for it, and if they want social signals, in my mind, things like likes and follows and shares are absolutely like reviews, right? I mean, if someone is sharing your content, that's as good as leaving a review and leaving a 5-star review. They're putting their own reputation and trust on the line by sharing your content,
Yeah.
right?
And
So
I loved how social signals were mentioned this year. Arguably, I think they should have been much higher, considering all of the conversations that we've been having with Google, the studies that have been put out.
Mhm.
But it is great that it appeared at all, but it was no surprise at all to any of us here that it made the list.
Yeah.
And I am curious if the amount of social people that they, surveyed for this
Mhm.
list too. Is it
Right.
people who just only focus on search, maybe aren't as, like I'm just curious to see how it moves over time, but at least it
Mhm.
was included. But I think us at SOCi would argue this is a little higher.
Well, and I also wonder too, like Mike said, a lot of this is targeted towards some of that like SMB kind of audience. And like I wonder if with the even like the survey respondents, like the professionals in the industry, if there was a better mix of the folks like us that are dealing with all of these locations with all of these brands and all of these different social profiles that they're trying to manage and linking them. And then we see such incredible results when they are linked, when they are active on social and that correlation. I wonder if it would have looked a little bit differently had the given audience maybe had a little more experience in like the scale.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Damien said it, like there can be blind spots if you're not thinking about those things. And
Right.
I also wrote down it could also be they're genuinely not seeing those same results as multi-location brands, right? Their followings are smaller,
Yes.
they don't have that whole network providing that relevance, to your point. And I think also we do have that advantage of seeing things in aggregate, right? If you're looking at one or two locations, you're not going to see the cumulative effect over lots of locations who are optimize, have different relevancy levels already and prominence levels already, and
Yeah.
what that does. And
I mean,
so,
we've pulled it many times. Like we have the ability to see, okay, for your locations that are active on social media, your locations that are linking their profiles, what do their Google Business profile results look like? And then finding those certain correlations, to your point, Mike, when you have hundreds of locations to try and base this analysis off of, uh-oh, we lost Mike's camera.
yeah,
Um,
sorry, guys.
so when you have hundreds of locations to base that off of, you do get a deeper understanding. It is harder to do an analysis in a study when you are only dealing with a small number of locations. So again, I mean, really excited and happy to see it here. But I think we all probably would have even put it a little bit higher, especially when we're considering the world of AI. I know that I might be getting ahead of myself here in the presentation, Mike, but obviously this year too, one of the new things that they considered were AI ranking factors. And I know that I think that overall kind of customer journey and customer experience across rep, social, search is what's really fueling some of that like AI sentiment and helping power, your visibility there as well.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Yeah. So, and it's why I kind of also put this is why we do tests like this, because again, we want to make sure we're looking at that prominence piece, right? So it was really nice for those who had reimagined to see Google highlighting. I know they put blogs out about this, but it was nice to see them share our study that we did with them. Couple other things that I was surprised, and we didn't even talk about, I think, when 2 weeks ago when we discussed this in an internal SEO juice. There's some other factors that I was surprised Google didn't mention, that, or not Google, sorry, the survey didn't mention. Things like menus as a ranking factor. We've seen a lot of great case studies about menus being a factor when people are searching for specific dishes. And we've also seen, Google has said specifically that it is a factor in improving, enhancing customer discovery, right? Discovery is what you're looking to be found in. So I was very surprised not to see that. Very surprised not to see a mention of having a Google rating of a 4.0 and above. That is a factor for ranking, but it is more of a factor on best type searches. So I guess if you're thinking about how to be found for just your main category, that might not appear, but it is also a negative ranking factor. So I was surprised to not see it appear on either.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, no mention of Google post copy as a factor.
I'm shocked at this. I really thought that this would have been the year of Google Post, just because of everything that we're seeing. I mean, the fact that you can include text in a Google Post and then run a search that includes that text and your location appears and is highlighted because of that included text seems blatantly obvious to me that the Google Post is influencing your appearance in search results. I don't know how nobody considered that. I shocked me, absolutely shocked me.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like that Joy study on the trees, right? It's the tests they're doing involve the main category and not these longer tail searches where you can really manipulate those things. And if these longer tail searches are proving that you can kind of dial in post copy that will get you showing, then the logical leap is that copy in general, even if it doesn't have a big effect on your main category, it still cumulatively kind of adds up. Then lastly, I was really surprised that there's only a single mention of Merchant Center at number 70 when we know Google heavily favors business with inventory validation and product-based searches. We see that if you do, this was, I think, a search for an iPhone, and you can see the businesses that are highlighted are those that have in stock, right? And Google even said at Reimagine, they provided some stats that retailers that display their inventory have 16% more impressions on Google, right? Because they're more relevant. They're relevant for those products. So it makes sense that they would get more impressions in product-based type searches.
Yeah, Merchant Center, again, I think it's hard because when you're doing a survey like this, you obviously have respondents who are dealing with a wide variety of different businesses. I think Merchant Center is obviously most important to retail customers. And so, if it's at 70 overall, okay, maybe. But if you are a retailer and you have product feeds and you need to be able to, publish out what's available, I would argue it's much higher in importance to your performance.
Yeah. Also, one other thing, I feel like it doesn't tell the full story on LLMs. It's not its fault. It's the first time they've tried to take a stab at this. As Damien showed, which we talked about last week, it really depends on the industry you're in, how you're ranking and what you're doing. So although these have some really good ideas for I think for factors to be looking at, It's, I think, a little too general to be actionable. I think it really is understand. I think if you're in an industry and you want to know, do searches for like discovery searches in your industry, you'll see commonalities and sites that come up. If your industry wasn't in what Damien showed, just do a search. It's really easy to see what's important for you.
And something I wanted to note on here, if anybody is looking at the study, you'll see number 2 is a dedicated page for each service. And this was something that when I saw the study come out, I messaged Mike and Damien, right away because I was like, ooh, we got to make sure people understand what this is saying. So from a lens of, if you are a plumber, a contractor, a small business, whatever you do, right? And you have a single website, the best way to appear in AI search results, I completely agree, is to break out those services into multiple pages. What this is not saying is to have a local page for every single individual location that focuses on your products and services, meaning like, if God, I always use them as an example, I'm sorry, but they're just always top of mind for me. If I am Dick's Sporting Goods and, I sell treadmills and I sell running shoes and, I have all of these different products, I'm not building a Pittsburgh treadmills, specific page. So just something to keep in mind. You don't want to go crazy. But that is what this is referring to is more of like, is your overall website mentioning all of your services, not necessarily at that hyper local level.
So that's not to say that if you have services and you don't right now have individual service pages for your brand, that is something you should definitely be looking at because those
Correct.
are really important to provide more semantic context for the things you offer. Lastly, again, I wanted to highlight that this is in no way disparaging this report. It really is just looking at these factors, these levers. What's really interesting is since last week when we were planning on talking about this, I was doing our local memo. If those who don't know, every Wednesday we have a blog that comes out. It's our local memo. We try and highlight 3 or 4 of the top things that are going on in search, social, marketing in general. This week was my week, and I discovered with all the news on this, we missed 2 other ranking factor studies. And what's really interesting is the people that published those took part in this study. So their findings were a little different though, and it did focus a little more on those factors that truly drive rank. So the first one was published by Sterling Sky. Joy Hawkins over there published this article on the factors that most correlate with near me searches. And right away got out this idea that optimizing for near me helps local listings rank. It may help your organic page rank. It does not, it kind of proved it didn't do anything for local listing rank. But the factors that correlated the most strongly with good rank were review signals and then local page signals. So the things that we know help prominence, and then a lot of these local page signals that are especially being really important within LLMs now, right? Like having that context, or as they say, creating really compelling local landing pages. So one of the things they also really highlighted is it's not just about the volume of reviews. It's not just about the rating, but it's also about the frequency, the idea that you want to continually get reviews. So it's not just about getting a whole bunch of reviews and then winning in that in your local market. It's about continually getting those reviews. And then there's another one that came out from Greg Giffords over at Search Labs, who also took part in the White Spark study, who also found reviews are one of the strongest signals in local search, impacting both visibility and client trust, the quantity, quality, recency, and responsiveness of reviews. So again, responding back, all play a role. Firms that actively manage their reputation not only tend to rank higher, but also win more clients. Their study was more industry specific based. They looked at personal injury lawyers, but it's still a local search. And again, review volume, the volume of reviews, the rating, and the frequency were all parts of that. So wrapping things up just on time here, really the takeaways for all of this, that these a lot of studies, and especially this opinion survey, this one in particular, is a great snapshot of these individual factors. Again, we're not saying any of these factors are wrong in any way. We're just saying the opinions on where they fall differ, and what it means may differ a little bit, like what it means for you as a multi-location business. So pay attention to those things that build prominence for queries within your industry. So ultimately get reviews, continue to get reviews, be engaging, photos, posts, strong CTAs, because that engagement is also a factor, and be social. Although this doesn't say it as much, social is coming in at that point. And so you want to pay attention to those things. Casey, Kelly, do you have any other closing words or thoughts about all of this?
I said my final thought here in the chat, but I said it last week. I'll say it again. I'll say it every week after this. You can never add too many photos. Get photos on your listings. Google Posts, I know they didn't make the cut, but my God, they should have. Be engaging with your listings, be active. Google wants to give credit for those locations that appear live and active and interactive, because more and more that's what customers are expecting. Yeah, so we'll continue obviously kind of using these as guidance. I'm sure we're going to have many a recall back to these studies as we're talking about things that happen over the next year. And as always, if anybody has any questions, do not hesitate to, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can reach out to your CSM. Your CSM will connect you with us.
And in January,
What's in January? Oh,
community.
the community. I'm like, oh God. Yeah, and in January, SOCi has a community. So there will be so much more information about that coming out, but we are super excited. The three of us will be active there as well, sharing a lot of this great content with you all. So we'll catch you there as well. You are on mute again, but I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
We will send this out after the call. We do have links to all three of these surveys for anybody to kind of dig in and see what we're talking about, how there's some even just a little bit of nuance. And yeah.
Cool. Thanks for joining.
We'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.